Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to Columbus KTC. Thank you all so much for braving the heat to be here in person. I really appreciate seeing you all. The last time I was talking in July, I was talking about the four kayas, which is a conceptual thing that originated with the historical Buddha, actually, in his effort to try to explain the unexplainable. As as Lao Tzu said in the Tao Te Ching, the Tao that can be spoken is not the Tao. And yet, there are those people who have realization, and there are a few of those around. And then there's the vast majority of the rest of us who don't. And at the same time, we've had the good fortune somehow to have the idea that we would like to become realized beings also. And so out of compassion, literally compassion, Buddha and others over the years have found ways to try to explain to us how we can walk the path so that we can gain our own experience and have our own direct experience of this thing called Buddha, or awakened mind. So the first, and there are two prime movers in all of this. In Buddhism, there are two beliefs. The first belief is that we all have the same fundamental nature as the awakened one. In fact, we're all potential awakened ones. The thing we seek isn't outside. It's not out there. It's not going to come because somebody dumped a bucket of grace on our heads. It's going to become, we've already had that. That's why we have Buddha nature. I'm not saying there's not grace. Oh my. But the point is, we already have that. And so for us, it's an article of belief simply because we don't have the direct experience yet. Now and then we may catch glimpses, but it's important to differentiate and understand that those glimpses aren't realization. Otherwise, what happens is, if we think that's it, we'll just go back to the cushion again and again, or to line dancing at the bar, or whatever made us feel good, and try to recreate that again and again and again, and our own idea of realization will become our prison and our trap. So it's really important to understand that while they tell us ultimate realization will kind of happen all at once, I believe that. I mean, because people I rely on have told me that. It's a process for us. All at once will happen eventually, but until we get to that point where the big reveal happens, we're in a process. So what I'm here to try to talk a little bit, or I'm trying to talk about a little bit of the process today. And out of compassion, our teachers, starting with the Buddha, came up with this idea of the kayas, which seemed to confuse a lot of people. It's like, what's that? It's a foreign kind of concept for Westerners like us, but it's a useful one. So my goal isn't to try to be scholarly here at all. I really want to talk about how understanding this can help us enrich our practice, because frankly, when our practice is enriched and we're going to get some enthusiasm for it, And these practices are brilliant. And the more we do them, the more steps we'll take down that path that that takes us to where we aspire to. So that's the idea here. The other belief that we have is that everything's interdependent. Everything. If something appears and exists, it happens because causes and conditions came about to where that could happen. What I do is going to affect others, and what others do is going to affect me, and vice versa. So we have this notion from birth, really. We're kind of hardwired to have the notion that our self stops at the edges of our skin. But we already know it doesn't. Just walking into this room today, if I was in a bad mood, you'd feel it, wouldn't you? You'd say, what's off with him today? Or something like that. Or, oh, he's not feeling well. I wish he was feeling better. So on. Or if I'm happy, you'll feel that, when you're around happy people, even if you're having a bad day. If just raw jealousy doesn't take over, you start to feel a little better yourself, It's a big deal when somebody smiles. It's a big deal. It's one of the best things we can do for the world is to smile at people and to look at them with loving eyes, okay? So this idea that we have the basis for enlightenment and yet we're physically present as individuals in the world, all right, is the basis for Nirmanakaya, what they call Nirmanakaya. That means like the one that shows up. I mean, that's not a direct translation. Don't quote me. I'm trying to be functional here. My dad was an engineer. I learned long ago that form follows function. So we're just trying to get the job done, and the labels are just the labels. And then what it is we carry with us, what radiates from us, are the sense of presence and qualities that we have. That's what they call the Sambhogakaya. Literal translation's enjoyment body. Well, guess what? When that gets all cleaned up and we are happy and we are loving, we can enjoy life pretty much. So the idea that it's called the enjoyment body isn't so far-fetched. But that's what that means. It doesn't mean that there's a separate, there's this physical thing here and then there's a separate thing here. Not at all. Then the third thing is this incredible space within which everything manifests, good, bad, and indifferent. And that's Dharmakaya. So the fact that anything is possible and everything is full. It's more about fullness than emptiness, actually. And I'll explain that in a minute. But that's the Dharmakaya. So they tried to give us three baskets of ideas that we could work on in order to gain this realization of who we actually are. Khentrul Rinpoche, the great Jonang master, says that our whole job in this lifetime is to unveil our sacred truth. So the path that we're on is for that. And why would we do that? Well, for the benefit of all beings, because everybody will benefit, including who we think of as ourself, which of course grows and changes and disappears and new people appear and so forth. We've all experienced that in this life. So that's just a little intro. And what I'd like to do is say a few things, use a few analogies, guide a little meditation so that you can get a taste of your own reality, your own experience, and also have plenty of time for questions and answers. Last time I didn't leave any time, or not much, and I want this to be much more free-flowing. In fact, if something is urgent and you figure you're going to forget it, just raise your hand right in the middle of when I'm talking. I don't want to stand on ceremony here. This isn't, I'm not wearing a dog collar and, all of that kind of thing. So you don't have to just sit quietly and listen. If you have something on your mind, particularly in this talk, I want to hear it, because responding to that may actually be important for others, be a way of serving others. But before we get started, let's chant the Refuge prayer together. I want you to be mindful while we're chanting it, because actually I could make a good argument that the entire path is right here, these 4 lines. Weird, right? When you consider the walls of books that are out there for all the stuff and all the concepts and labels and jargon, this is the Prego spaghetti sauce of Buddhism. It's in there. Now, you might have to have some insight to understand it and see it, but you'll get that along the way for sure. So I'd like to just recite it twice together in English. It is of extraordinary importance that you understand what you're doing when you're practicing the Dharma. It's really important. It makes it a little bit difficult for us sometimes, being Westerners, Americans, and our texts are in Tibetan and Sanskrit. Holy moly. So we use translations and transliterations and all of that. But the important thing, really, is that as you go through, you understand how that touches you today and how you respond to that today. So you need to know what the words mean. And then it's also important to contemplate the words, not necessarily while you're doing the practice, because there's certain rhythm to practice, but maybe when you're sitting quietly at night before you fall asleep, instead of watching a TV show, turn it off, look at your refuge prayer and think about what each line means. Honestly, I do that with the practices that I do, including this one. And it's been extraordinarily beneficial and enriching for me. I wouldn't be sitting here doing this if I didn't do that, truly. I'm just literally an ordinary practitioner, no different than you. Whatever understanding I have has come from the blessings of my teachers and from turning off the TV and contemplating my practice at night before I go to bed. So, in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the assembly most excellent, I take refuge until I reach enlightenment. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I achieve enlightenment for the sake of all beings. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the assembly most excellent, I take refuge until I reach enlightenment. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I achieve enlightenment for the sake of all beings. Sunje chudam soki choknam la, changchu pardu dagni kyab suchi, nagi jinso gipe sonam ki, rola pinchir sanje drupar shok. So, generally, when we're doing practice, at the beginning we start with refuge, and well, why? I think it's an appropriate question. Why are we doing that? Well, what we're saying is some things aren't working perfectly in my life, and it's probably because my motivation's a little off. It's probably because I'm chasing after something that's not worth chasing after, or running away from something I really don't need to be afraid of, or just kind of overwhelmed and indifferent and not doing much and feeling like off because I'm not doing much. And we all know that this life is a time-limited affair, no doubt about that. And so when we're not doing much, that's a little rough. That's a little rough on us. So we start to think about that a little bit, and we decide, okay, rather than taking refuge in this view of myself, I'm going to go and take refuge in the Buddha, awakened mind. Oh, what's awakened mind? Oh, it's the Dharmakaya. Oh, what's the Dharmakaya? Oh, well, it's got the qualities of the Sambhogakaya. Oh, what's that? And so on and so on. This is how you can kind of think about these things, contemplate these things, work with them. So I'll give you one analogy. I love this analogy. So you're holding a cup of coffee, it's really full, okay? Somebody bumps into you, coffee spills. And they look at you and they say, why did you spill the coffee? And then you say, because you bumped into me. Well, that's the wrong answer. You spilled the coffee because there was coffee in the cup. That's why you spilled coffee. If there was tea in the cup, you would have spilled tea. If there was nothing in the cup, you would have spilled nothing, okay? What we have in our cup all the time is what's at issue here, okay? So what we have in our cup all the time is what we believe our self is, who we think we are, and what we like and what we don't like. And what we don't care about, see, comes back around just like that. So it's a real world example of what's going on here. And with practice, we say, I don't like spilling coffee. I think I want to fill my cup with something else. So when I get bumped into, something different than that spills out. That's good. That's a good insight. We're in control of that. That's the thing. What to do with that? Holy moly, that's not so easy. So we're lucky within the tradition of Buddhism to have these practices that help us, because they're psychologically brilliantly structured practices. So they help us to fill our cup with the qualities of a Buddha, okay? So here's the first part of the analogy. Now, please understand, analogies are never perfect. You can blow holes in this, and please don't, but I know you already can. It's if the analogy was perfect, it wouldn't be an analogy, it'd be the thing itself. So this is as good as I can do. So what's happening is, at the beginning, when we sit down to practice, the great advice is that we start with a little Shamata. What's that? Well, our minds, our brains, whatever, that organ up there that secretes thoughts is always putting stuff out there about what we like and what we don't like, what we want to get more of, what we want to get rid of. A lot of times we don't have what we want and we don't want what we have, and it's like we can spend the whole day on that. Meanwhile, even if we get what we think we want or avoid what we think we don't want, at the end of the day, somehow happiness evades us. Have you ever noticed that? I mean, I sure have. It's so disappointing to achieve a goal and just not feel anything spectacular or having to fake a celebration. I know you've seen that. Happens in sports all the time, right? Boy, it's really depressing to get what you want and not feel better. Just as depressing to avoid a close call and avoid something you didn't want and not feel relieved. Why is that? Well, that's because there's this substrate deep in our consciousness where our habits and our propensities and our hopes and our fears all reside. They're very quiet and very subtle, and they arise. They don't arise until we get jostled somehow, right? Somebody bumps into us, and that's what comes spilling out, you see? So the Buddha saw this problem, and he said, we've got to give sentient beings a way of developing the tools to pacify all those things that need pacified, to heal the things that need to be healed, and to engender qualities that aren't based on selfishness, self-centeredness. So that's what our practices are about. And in order to make this kind of not mystical, not mumbo-jumbo, because the Buddha was kind of an anti-religionist. He was sort of rebelling against the Hindu belief system in what he did. That's why he elevated women who were, not players at the time. And still, even after he did what he did, there were still cultural limitations. We all have to grow up through that. There are a lot of examples. So he began to work with it, and the first thing he gave us was Shamata, which is, as you know, just simply sitting quietly and not trying to get rid of your thoughts, but just seeing them. And rather than being engaged with them, don't get engaged with them, just watch them. Where do they come from? Where do they stay? Where do they go? You can't find any of that when you look at them, if you just look at them. So you can come to a place where this inner turmoil of likes and don't like and so forth are starting to not have the control anymore because they're just thoughts. And what you practice every day is letting go of thoughts. What can arise within that? Okay? Well, that's the next thing. So we practice compassion meditation in order to begin to actually train ourselves to respond to life by engendering the qualities of kindness and compassion. It's in there. Well, we practice that. There's formal practice for that. And then we try to have a glimpse of who we actually are. We rest. We open. We realize we can accommodate everything. Space isn't an exact analogy for Dharmakaya, but it's pretty good. So imagine your space. And does space hang around up there saying, oh, I hate that asteroid that just went through there? Wait a minute. Oh, look at that. A star is born. Oh my God. Do you think space is doing all that? Or, oh my God, that meteor ran into my favorite planet. I'm going to punish that thing. No. So at the beginning, we begin with just being able to drop our thoughts. And then we think to ourselves, oh, and this is important. Why am I doing this? Why? Well, being honest, a lot of times it's because I feel lousy and I want to feel better. So I'm going to go to my cushion. Okay, fine. But we have to eventually expand that, realizing that other people don't feel so good, and what we think, do, and say actually can impact them and help them. And eventually, once we get that and we start to really think that way, lo and behold, that's what makes us feel better. Wow. So Buddha is teaching the path, after calming the mind, of engendering these qualities. And those qualities extend beyond who we are. It's what we fill our teacup with, so that when life jostles us, what extends beyond us isn't yelling at our family or kicking the dog or, screaming in traffic where it makes no difference anyway, just leaves us upset. It's no way to live, right? So we start to train in these qualities. That's Sambhogakaya. And Nirmanakaya is the present being right here, you and me, in an unenlightened form. I guess you would say potential Nirmanakaya, not actual Nirmanakaya. Shakyamuni Buddha was actual Nirmanakaya. We're potential, which means that we show up as a compassionate, loving being full of these qualities of joy and peace for the benefit of all beings. That's the goal. So at the very beginning, we're told, set the motivation. Okay, we all know we're not quite there yet, but that's where we want to go. It's really important to be motivated in the right way and to have aspirations going in the right direction. There are some folks that will do this or that kind of meditation or spiritual practice to get this or that power or benefit or whatever. It's a fool's errand. We don't last long. 100 years at the most. Not much time left for me, frankly. Why waste it? Why waste it on that? So we have this literally perfect framework to begin to engender these qualities and to recognize that our mind is completely open and luminous. So the luminosity part is important. We don't see things without the luminosity, right? Eventually, within some period of time, when you're sitting in meditation, simply watching your thoughts and letting go, of course, you will find that your thoughts themselves are those rays of light. You will. And when you see the thoughts of a Buddha, or you read about what they're doing or what they must be doing, and you realize simply by thinking of blessing a being, they can bless a being. It becomes very concentrated and very powerful. We all have that potential, all right? So this idea of kayas helps us understand, helps our mind settle down with this idea that we possess the thing that we seek. We possess a sacred truth, and all we're doing is uncovering it, all right? Any questions on that? It's like a functional definition of what this kaya thing is. Okay.
You said that in Shamata, we can also think about where the thought comes from, where it is now, where it's going.
Sure. Sure. Well, there are various forms of shamatha. So at first when we sit down, we just are simply noticing thoughts and letting go of thoughts, right? But once we are, and we'll calm down with that. We will. And we start identifying with the space within which thoughts arise, mind, right? Space, the openness. And once we're looking at the nature of mind, we can look at the nature of thought. It's also part of shamatha. It's a natural level. You know, there's this two-part thing, shamatha and vipassana. I don't want to go too far afield here, but vipassana is called insight meditation, and it's done in different ways. When your shamatha comes to a place where you really do calm down, I mean, for real, that means you're sitting there, and okay, the thoughts come, the thoughts go, and you're just resting on your breath. Okay. And you notice that, oh, I think I'm there. Oop, that's a thought. You let it go. You're just resting on the breath. There will come a point where there's a great deal of space between thoughts and a great deal of openness that you become aware of, great deal, right? And at that point, a thought will arise and things have gotten, what shall I say, in athletics and sport, they call it being in the flow. You're in the flow enough with your practice that you can actually look at the nature of thoughts that arise, right? So that becomes the beginning, actually, of natural compassion. Because guess what? You realize all beings also have the same thing. But for most people, the thought thing that's happening, the thinking, is too speedy. And there's just like an overwhelming waterfall of thoughts and emotions and sensations and all of that. And it's very unworkable when it's like that. It's a little bit like if you go rafting in white water. You can only do so much to control your raft. That water's going to take you where it's going to take you. That's the way it is for most of us when we first sit down. Eventually, though, we get down the mountain, and the stream becomes wider and flows into a river, and the river is wide and powerful. Seems more peaceful, but underneath it's way more powerful. You don't want to get caught in an undertow. So that's kind of the next phase, all right, in shamatha. And then the third phase, once you've learned to deal with how to be at peace with that, the nature of that, of course, the river flows into the ocean. And there's an interesting quality to this. Usually the rivers have names. It's like I'm the Eric River right now. And oceans have names. Dalai Lama's name, Tenzin Gyatso. Gyatso means ocean. Okay? The ocean of qualities. Tenzin Gyatso. And oceans, what is a wave's enlightenment? Well, it realizes it's the ocean, right? We look at them and, we judge them and label them and do this. Look at that wave. And from the wave's perspective, if it thinks I'm a little too high or I'm a little too low or I'm a little too this or that, well, it appears and it disappears and it's still the ocean. When it's enlightened, it realizes it's the ocean. Do you see? That's all Shamata. And Vipassana is turning that around and having insight into that process and being able to actually work with it. That's my understanding. Other people might think of it a different way, but like I said, I'm very functional. This helps me with practice when I think about it that way. It's not necessarily academic. So there's this thing. When Buddha taught all this, he said, first thing, start with yourself. Start with yourself. Tenzin Palmo, a great, great nun, talks about this, and she says, if you break your leg and it's in a cast, all you're thinking about all the time is my leg, and you stub your toe when you're in the cast, and oh my gosh, it's horrible, and it's, oh my foot, and then it's itchy, and it's this and it's that. You're pretty much always thinking about your leg until it's healed. And then once it's healed and you're walking around and you forget about it, right? So if all we're doing is thinking about our ego, ourself, we need to look and see if we've been wounded. Because we're going to forget ourselves if we're healed. We're going to be selfless if we're healed. And so whatever you have to do, and it may not be meditation, may not be the right modality for your healing, by the way. It could be counseling. It could be medicine that you need. It could be a lot of things. But look at yourself and take care of it. Why? Because this is the Nirmanakaya. It's got the potential to be Buddha, but you're never, ever going to be able to get past your self-centered thinking when you're unhealed. You're going to be reacting out of that, for sure. So this spiritual path isn't supposed to be something magical, the silver bullet. Not at all. It really works when we can apply this motivation that is simply summarized as the benefit for all beings without exception. That's it. It really doesn't work all that well when it's all about me, me, me. As long as I'm thinking about me, 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 not much progress. So I can sit and I can think, oh, my meditation, my samadhi, my realization, oh, my experience, oh, I saw rainbow lights today, whatever. Me, 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 me. If you ever want to know where your progress meter for yourself in the meditation path is, just look at how many me, 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 me thoughts you have. Me, me, me. Just look at that. And that is why, at the beginning of every practice, the first excellence is motivation. Excellent motivation, which is, I'm going to do this for the benefit of all beings. So, if you're going to do that, you have to start with yourself. Another Taoist thing, Shuangzi said, when the shoe fits, the foot is forgotten. Same thing. When your shoes don't fit and you're walking through the mountains all the time, you get blisters and all, you're just thinking, My feet, my feet, my feet, right? Get a shoe that fits. So I also would recommend at this point, if you want to meditate on these stages, to work with practice that way. I mean, you may like Shamata, you might not. You might like mantra practice, you might not. Find the one that works for you today, okay? And then really go for it. Surprise, surprise, that might change in a couple years too. And that's not just okay, that's great. And that's why we have mentors and teachers around and stuff to say, hey, this is what's going on now, and I'm feeling like it's time for a shift. What do you think? And you talk about that, and you find the next appropriate step. And that's how all this all works. So, so we use these practices in that way. Now let's take a minute. Just take a minute. I'm going to guide a little meditation practice so that maybe I can try to convey what that might be like. So just take a few seconds and calm down. Sit up straight. And let your mind rest on my voice the way you would rest on your breath in your personal Shamata meditation. So to begin with, we can feel how many labels and judgments are arising. It's part of the process of hearing a talk. So just find that part of your mind that's doing that labeling and judging. And breathe into it and let it relax. And from the bottom of your heart, wish to benefit all beings by essentially filling up this life with good qualities. And wish deeply for that. And then imagine your guru just in front of you, above your head. You know, it doesn't have to even be a person. According to Trunguru Rinpoche, the ultimate guru is the Dharma itself. So you can imagine the Dharma as a luminous being. And from your guru comes a white light that touches your forehead. And flows in the entire structure of your body, your bones, your nerves, your muscles. Even at a cellular level. in the structure of your cells, in your brain, in your blood, and so forth. Purifying everything that would keep you from recognizing it. As a Buddha in this present moment. And then imagine a red light comes from your guru and touches your throat, and it fills that being, that presence in the world with all the wonderful qualities, the 6 perfections: generosity, ethics, patience, joy, mindful awareness, and wisdom. And just imagine that the light is flowing into you. And causing your being to resonate. Those qualities, they're all there. They just need to be touched with blessing. That's all. And so you invite the blessing and rest with it. So even though this is flowing into you and within you, obviously, it extends far beyond you. And then use your imagination to see a blue light coming from your guru and into your heart, where you engender this space, then it can accommodate everything. Without judgment, without anger, without lust. A free, open space within which all of your life arises. So now we've touched body and speech, which is our way of relating to everything in the world, and mind, which accommodates all that appears and exists. All that's left is activity, how we respond. How do we respond? And why, having this view, do I still create difficulties for myself and others? Well, there's some deep imprints in the deepest, most subtle part of our consciousness that are karmas and habits and propensities. And we let all the lights, all 3, come at once and touch those and heal them and realize, those may have served me well in the past. And we can thank them, thank you, and let them go. And allow this light to heal them, to free us of the imprisonment of our own preferences, so that we're free to respond anywhere at any time with kindness and compassion. And then we just rest. That's it. We just rest. And after a moment of resting in that, of course, we dedicate the merit. Deep in our heart, wishing that the goodness that we caught a glimpse of for that moment can flow through the universe and touch every sentient being without exception, in order to bless them in such a way that they too can remove all this stuff that's covering over their sacred nature. And then we get up and go about our day. As they say, 1 ringy dingy, 2 ringy dingy, 3 ringy dingy. If you do that every day, your mental habits start to change. How you see yourself starts to change. How you work with others starts to change. How much you can take starts to change. I had a really bad week at work last week. I don't know about all y'all. Horrible, it was hard. I was sad, I was angry. I had all those things. However, let me put it this way. If I can remember myself 30 years ago, and wow, I would just want to run away, and I didn't spend time with Jeannie and my kids because I had this wounded ego that just needed to get away. Why? Well, I wasn't doing anything much at that time to heal that. And it was screaming me, 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 and there's not a heck of a lot you can do about it when that's happening, honestly. But over time, so when I had a bad week last week, it was really a lot different. I came home. I was able to talk about it, share about it, cry about it. It's part of being real. And guess what? The Dharmakaya, my Buddha nature, can contain all of that. And I don't have to lose my aspiration towards being kind and compassionate in my life and skillful. I don't have to lose that simply because things got hard, that my teacup got bumped. And so what spilled out was genuine sadness. Also a genuine wish to take this sad song and make it better, as the Beatles said, right? And why was I able to do that now and I couldn't do it 30 years ago? Because I practice this a lot. That's why. And honestly, it's too late when things go wrong to say, oh my, I better go get this now. Kempo Kartha Rinpoche used to say, that's like trying to learn how to build a fire truck when the house is already on fire. The point is you're being introduced to this now. Build your fire truck. Someday there will be a fire. And in the meantime, even when there's not a fire, you can run it around in parades, and you can make the hose give water to the kids so they can play in it during the summer when it's real hot. It's not useless. You know, it impacts every moment of every day along the way. So I really would encourage you to work with these kayas, just whatever practice you do. If you're going with a traditional practice, notice how it's taking your mind through this gate of recognizing that this incarnation has the potential to be an Nirmanakaya, and that these sets of qualities you have the potential to be the qualities of a Buddha, and how these activities have the potential to be the activities of a Buddha, all happening within this vast freedom and openness. It's a beautiful view. That is what's called the view, okay? So when we break down Buddhist practice, we break it down into view. There's your view, just gave it to you. Meditation, which is practice. And practice is practice. I don't know if any of you are musicians, but you know, they asked Arturo Rubinstein once how to get to Carnegie Hall, and he said, practice, 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 right? And what do you practice? Well, when you're a pianist, you run scales. When you get to Carnegie Hall, you play Chopin, or, you know, whichever. I just picked him because he's really difficult. But when we get on our cushion every day, we have the opportunity to strengthen the things that we want to strengthen, and debunk the things that need to be debunked, and untie the karmic knots in us from our histories that need to be untied. And we can let ourselves do that. And when we find ourselves holding on to our karmic knots, which we all do, you know, this is my history, this is what happened, whatever, we can recognize that and work with it, and eventually be able to let it go. So it's no longer part of our prison. So, yeah, there are probably a couple more things, but I think I'm going to leave that right there. There are a couple minutes left, though, for questions. If anybody has any questions, comments, we have microphones for questions. Well, I guess there are not any. Or maybe there is one.
Thank you, Eric.
You're welcome.
Thank all of you for letting me talk. I need a translation here,
Yeah.
because I'm American.
Yes, you are.
I only speak one language.
Me too.
So what's a kaya mean? What's the translation of it?
The direct translation is body.
Body.
So, yeah. Yeah, it's like let's see, got the exact translations here somewhere. I can look them up. Okay, so nirvana is usually translated as manifestation. That's what I meant by, the one that shows up. You and me, we're manifesting here in this space, right? Sambhogakaya, as I mentioned, Sambhoga is bliss, basically. It's 2 words, but boil it down. So it's the enjoyment body. And I like to think of that as, speech is how we communicate with ourselves. There's self-talk. It's how we communicate with others. And speech can be even our actions, because our actions speak louder than words, and so forth. So speech is all that relational stuff. And how do we get our relationships into that enjoyment mode? That's Sambhogakaya. We're really relating to one another. And Dharmakaya is ultimate reality. Dharma being ultimate reality, so ultimate reality body. And that is, as the title of the movie said, everything, everywhere, all at once. That's really what Dharmakaya is. The reason it's called emptiness sometimes is because things have to be completely empty in order to accommodate anything. Using our teacup as an example, it's like if you show up with a full teacup and somebody wants to put more tea in it, it just goes all over the place. If you show up with something empty, a lot can be poured into it. So emptiness is just a way of thinking about how all this can exist and all be interdependent or interconnected. Is that clear?
Oh, yeah. It's so clear.
I'm trying, man.
Well, it's my limitation. Talking about translation still, I think it would be really neat if next weekend we greet the lamas in Tibetan.
Yeah.
Just 3 words. Hello, thank you, goodbye.
Okay.
So, Eric,
Yeah.
what are those Tibetan words?
Don't know.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Well, it is 12:32, so let's dedicate the merit of having gotten together and contemplating the Dharma. I want to point out one thing about this dedication of merit. In the second stanza, because this is more translation stuff, right? It mentions 2 particular deities, Manjushri, who's considered the bodhisattva of wisdom, okay? And Samantabhadra. Samantabhadra is a representation of Dharmakaya, ultimate reality, okay? So when we're talking about wisdom and ultimate reality, when you read Manjushri and Samantabhadra, you can think wisdom, ultimate reality, okay? I think it helps a little bit. So let's read it in English. By this merit, may all attain omniscience. May it defeat the enemy wrongdoing. From the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death, from the ocean of samsara, may I free all beings. The courageous Manjushri, who knows everything as it is. Samantabhadra, who also knows in the same way, and all the bodhisattvas, that I may follow in their path, I completely dedicate all this virtue. Thanks, everybody.